would you be afraid that you're going to train too well and they're going to take your job? That is horrible mentality to go through. And unfortunately, in this industry, I do see it a lot. The more you can absorb and learn and take in as somebody, the more you're going to be equipped to be a leader. And I would love for every single one of my team members to be my boss someday.
A child who once trembled at the thought of talking to strangers now shapes the marketing strategy for an $8 billion real estate empire. Sarah Gencarella's journey from certified accountant to multifamily marketing leader wasn't in any career playbook, but neither was her bold decision to start over as a leasing agent, betting on herself and an industry she barely knew. Now as vice president of marketing at Olympus Properties, she's helping drive the company's explosive growth with a leadership philosophy that turns conventional wisdom on its head.
In 2017, I think we had around 40-ish properties, less than 15,000 units. We now have over 34,000 units and are valued at over $8 billion.
Wow.
And so I've never, ever felt stagnant in my career at Olympus. I've always felt like I'm learning, growing, and there's something for me to do, and the job is not yet done. And I still feel that way to this day.
I guess I'm curious, how do you think ChatGPT and all that stuff is going to change the audit role?
Man, that is...
Sarah, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Shiv. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm very excited to chat with you for many reasons. One, I've known you for multiple years. Two, you seem to be my most loyal listener, so I really appreciate that. And
Great
three,
podcast.
You're just a super fun, awesome person, so I'm really excited to dive in.
Well, I'm excited to be here, and I love the idea of this podcast. I think people's personal stories can tell so much more than professional, so it's great.
Totally.
Yeah.
So what do I need to know about Sarah as a kid to understand the Sarah I'm sitting in front of today?
So I think one of the funniest parts that a lot of people may not know about me is I was actually a pretty shy kid growing up. And my parents really, they did not want that to be the case. And so growing up, I was born in Southern California. And when I was 5, we moved out to Atlanta, Georgia. I lived in Atlanta, Georgia for 8 years. And then at age 13, right when I was about to go into high school, we moved to Cleveland, Ohio. Not sure if anyone is from there or has been there, but there's actually some pros, not all cons, I promise. And they really instilled in me during that entire time the importance of building relationships and connecting with people. And I remember they actually forced me to introduce myself to a random person at church every Sunday because they did not want me to be a shy person or afraid of people or afraid of public speaking. And I would cry every Sunday until I finally got used to it. But I was actually very shy and not necessarily the outgoing person that I am now. And I attribute that all to them and their persistence in getting me to do that. And they actually made me do speech and debate and all of that. And at the time, I obviously wasn't a big fan. Plus, moving at age 13, not the biggest fan, but it's given me so much more of a better understanding of different parts of the world. And I've been able to build relationships with people from all over because of some of those experiences that might not have been super fun at the time, but I'm beyond grateful for now.
So are you, would you classify yourself, even though you are more extroverted, would you still classify yourself as an introvert?
I wouldn't. I think it completely changed me. All of that. And you really have to learn to adapt and to make friends. And I wouldn't trade it for the world now. I mean, I have people that I know and can go to in almost every area of the country. Now, we're all spread out and whatnot, just simply because of the fact that we moved around a lot and the relationships that I had to make and the things that I was forced to do. So in speech and debate, I don't know if anybody ever participated in that in high school or college, but there's one type of speech in particular called impromptu. And you're given just a couple of minutes to prepare a 5 to 7 minute speech, and it's supposed to be well structured, and it always stressed me out every time. And to think that here I am now having multiple opportunities to speak in multifamily is kind of crazy to think about. And I don't think I would be doing that if I hadn't been kind of forced to rip the Band-Aid and do something that was really hard for me.
That's interesting. Yeah, I meet a lot of people that like whenever I meet somebody, one of the fun questions I like to ask is like, where, like, are you an introvert or extrovert?
Yeah.
And what I usually hear is people can be extroverted,
Mhm.
but they actually are introverted, right? So
Ah.
you may meet, I meet a lot of people that are super social,
Yeah.
but when you ask them that question, they're actually introverted and they just practiced being an extrovert,
Yeah.
which I think is super interesting. On the speech and debate side, we have a lot of similarities. I didn't do speech and debate. My sister did HI, which was humorous
Yes.
interpretation.
Oh, I always thought those people were so funny.
Yeah. And we moved to, I don't know if you know this, but we moved to India when I was 12. So
Oh, wow.
my family and
I
I,
didn't know that.
yeah, my family and I moved to India. My dad got offered the opportunity to join a startup. Me, my two siblings, and my parents moved to India. And very similar to you, like, got the opportunity to meet a lot of people. And when I think about the most impactful thing about that move, I think it's just the ability to be adapting, right? And
Yeah.
adaptable. So like, I totally hear you on that.
Adaptability is key in every aspect of life, especially multifamily, the workplace.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, cool. So
Um,
you moved to Ohio.
yes.
And when did you, so you went to college in Texas?
Actually, in California. So, Texas is let's see, California, Georgia, Ohio, back to California and Texas. So, I guess the fourth state that I've lived in. But I went to a small school in the Los Angeles area called Azusa Pacific University. It's near Pasadena. And that's where I actually met my husband, who's in the multifamily industry as well.
Nice. Okay. And do you have siblings?
I do. I have a younger brother. His name is Jack. He is 7.5 years younger than me. So there's a little bit of an age gap, but I think we've recruited a lot of people to move to the Texas area when we moved out here. He now lives about 20 minutes from me in the DFW Metroplex.
So what was your relationship? Because 7.5 years means that he was like roughly what, 11 when you were going to college?
Right.
10 or 11.
Yeah, he was. It's crazy. I think, it's a little bit rocky when you're living in the same household. But I think when I went to college, our relationship got so much closer, and we are now really, really close. And I have nothing but amazing things to say about him and his work ethic. He now works for Bell. Bell Partners, and he's an engineer for them, and super smart guy, really, really awesome, dedicated work ethic. He just got married last year, and him and his wife are in the DFW Metroplex now. I don't know if I would have said that when I was like a 12-year-old and I had a 5-year-old little brother who was pestering the heck out of me. But it was so fun looking back. We recently, I don't know if anybody has taken all their home videos that were like on the little VHS or the little tiny DVDs that in the video cameras. We digitized them all, and we've been watching through them and watching through like 5-year-old birthday parties and whatnot, and all the fun memories from growing up. And he was a cute kid.
Love it. How would you characterize the difference in character traits between your two parents, and like what did you think they instilled in you?
That's a great question. And I want to attribute, I mean, the vast majority of everything, like where I am in my life now, to my parents because of their incredibly strong work ethic, but their prioritization of building relationships. So both my parents are accountants by trade, both CPAs. And so I automatically thought that is the only thing that I could do in life, right? Because that's what both my parents did. And so they both worked incredibly hard. My dad worked for KPMG for his entire career, from age 22 until the mandatory retirement age at age 60.
Wow.
And so that's pretty unheard of, and a huge testament to him. He, was promoted multiple times, which is why we did move from Los Angeles to Atlanta, then to Cleveland. And ultimately, his value of people and relationships, I think, spoke volumes to how he was able to progress in his career and also how hard he worked. And I looked at him as an example of kind of what I wanted to do in my own career and how I wanted to progress. And he was kind of my idol in that aspect. My mom also worked for KPMG as well. She was on the tax side. And when
Did they meet at KPMG?
They did.
Okay.
They did. Can I tell a story about their first date? Their first date was skydiving. Very first date. Yes. So super crazy. My mom is actually 4 years older than my dad, and my dad had done a rotation into the tax practice for a short time. So my mom was actually his boss, and he got the guts to ask her out and see what she was doing that weekend. And she said, "Well, I'm going skydiving. Would you like to come?" And petrified out of his mind, he couldn't say no because he really wanted to take her on a date. And so they went skydiving for their very first date, and the rest is history.
That's so interesting. I was listening to a podcast that talked about the ideal first, like it talked about how to build connection.
Yeah.
And one of the things it said that's really important on the date is the right balance between fear and excitement. So they looked at a study and they found that people who had a date, if they were crossing a bridge that was made of stone and stable, the date went less well than if the bridge was rocky and shaky. And the reason is because when the bridge is rocky and shaky, there's a healthy mix of like fear, but excitement. And that fear and excitement like creates a bond between two people. So I wonder if that's...
I think there was a little bit of fear and excitement, especially on my dad's side. But that is too funny. That is really interesting.
Isn't that really interesting?
Wow.
Yeah.
They should put that on like Hinge profiles now or something. I don't know.
Recommended dates. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So your parents met at KPMG. One thing you mentioned that I'm super interested about is the idea that like when your dad obviously worked super hard. You grew up like observing him. Something I think about is like when you learn from your parents, do you feel like you learned from your dad because you saw him working hard or because he like talked about the value of working hard? Because there's this idea of like learning by observing. So like if you see somebody doing something, kids will watch their parents and do things, babies, right? Did your dad preach the value of working hard, or did you just watch him work hard and that's what you...
I think it was more of the watching. Yeah. He's a very humble individual. He doesn't brag about himself at all. I think what he does speaks 10 times louder than any words that could come out of his mouth, which is a huge testament to him. And it was almost never an option for me. I never wanted to let my parents down. I saw my mom, she started her own tax practice, certified financial planner, and everything like that when she ended up leaving KPMG. And I always knew that I wanted to be like them because they just were always so driven, but they were also so generous with both their time and their finances to other people. And so that was a goal of mine. And it really, growing up, the way that I kind of processed that was I looked at every single opportunity in whatever I did to impact what my life would be like in the future. So I told myself going into high school, like every single grade that I get on every single test could impact what my life is going to be like in the future. And that's kind of the mentality that I operated under. And I largely attribute that to them, not because they told me I needed to do that by any means, or they said like, hey, if you get, X, Y, and Z grade, you're going to be grounded. Like we never had those types of conversations because we never had to, because they were so motivating just in the way that they raised me with their example.
That must put a lot of pressure on you though, in when you like hold yourself to that of a standard, right?
It
Like if
does.
do you hold yourself to a high standard?
I like to try to think I do at least. And it does become stressful. But at the end of the day, you have to have grace with yourself for sure. But I do think that it gives you kind of a different mentality if you go through life like that. If every decision is going to impact you in some way, shape, or form.
One of the things I try to do is like balancing the like it's really like oftentimes there's many examples in life where you have to like balance things that are totally polar opposite, right? The idea of having unconditional self-belief, but also knowing that like you can't fly, right? The idea of like being able to hold yourself to super high standards, but also understand when you need to like give yourself grace. The idea that you need to work super, super hard, but then you also need to like rest.
Yeah.
And I'm just super fascinated by the idea of like balancing things that are too separate.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes like you have to. And I think success sits in the extremes of things. So yeah, that's super interesting.
Yeah. Very interesting.
So, okay. So you went to college in California. Something I thought was really interesting when I was going through your LinkedIn is it's clearly you're very academic. You did very well in school. How like what was that experience like in college? Like, did you hold yourself to the same standard? What did you have to give up to like do that well?
Sleep, I guess. I, you know, as I said, every decision, I kind of overthink things at times. I'll be the first to admit it. But I think when you find something that you enjoy studying or that you enjoy doing, it almost makes it not like work. And
What did you study?
I actually studied accounting in college because, again, as I said earlier, I thought that was the only path that people could go down. I knew it wasn't, but I liked numbers. I liked the way that things made sense, financials, all of that.
Have you been good at numbers growing up? Were you good at math?
Yes, I loved math. Okay. That was my side of the brain. I do like creative things, but I think math would definitely be my preference any day. And so I really enjoyed all of my like coursework and everything in my major. And then I was surrounded by a really good group of people. So yes, college was difficult, but at the same time, I enjoyed so many different aspects of it. And I would, set aside certain times to studying, but certain things, for other aspects as well. My husband and I actually met at college, both working for the admissions office. So what we would do is it was almost like you were like a leasing consultant, but for the college, right? Yeah. So you would give tours to all of the incoming high school students and their families, and you had to dress professionally, walk backwards with a 2-hour tour across.
Oh yeah, we had the
okay,
you were
campus.
a tour admissions officer. Yeah, we had that at USC.
Yep. By the way, both my parents went to USC, so huge shout out to USC, fight on. But that's where we met, and that's kind of where we figured out that we liked a lot of the same things. But with college, working, sometimes 20 to 30 hours a week, doing classes full time. I also ran cross country in college for the first 2 years. So it was a busy time. But for some reason, I always find that the more things I give myself to do, the more I just feel like I get done, and I don't necessarily feel more busy. But when I'm less busy, I actually feel more busy. So I don't know. Maybe I'm the only one that feels that way. But.
No, it's called. Have you heard of this thing called Parkinson's law?
No.
So it's the idea that like work expands with the time allotted. So if I tell you that you have to finish this like marketing budget by tomorrow morning at 9 a.m.
Yeah.
Like you can probably do it the same way you can do it if I tell you that you have to finish it by end of week. Of course it varies, but like people tend to look at like a timeline and then just like get things done in that timeline. So similarly to you, like I also feel that like the more I do, the more you're able to just manage because you're just like kind of like always on.
Right.
But when you have like one thing to do the whole day, it's like, okay, I'm going to do it later, and you procrastinate and all that stuff.
That is super interesting. I I didn't know there was an actual term for it. So that is great to know. Parkinson's law.
Yeah, Parkinson's law.
I have to look that up.
Yeah.
That's great.
So you guys met. Why did you decide to work in college?
That's a great question. I always wanted to challenge myself, and I've always enjoyed working a little bit more than school. I knew I was never going to be the person to go to multiple years of school and go down the whole, master's or doctoral route, which I have the utmost respect for people that do. It is not for me. I just felt so much more productive with my time when I was working, and I thoroughly enjoyed what I did and making those relationships with incoming high school students and going to college fairs and, representing the college and talking about all of the amazing things that we had to offer and having those kind of conversations I felt like would set me up for success more than any class really ever could.
I was chatting with Christian from RPM yesterday.
Uh-huh.
We did a recording, and one of the things we talked about was how college was this interesting journey of emotional ups and downs, right? Like I started with a certain group of friends and felt that like they may have not been the right fit, and kind of went through this chapter where I was transitioning friend groups and all that stuff. Did you feel like college was like ups and downs for you at all? Were there any things that stood out?
I think there definitely were, especially with, my first 2 years being dedicated to sports, essentially, and cross country and track. And then the latter 2 years being more dedicated to working with the admissions office. And I knew that I had to make a decision to either continue my running career and throughout college, or I had to quit that because there was not enough time to do both running and, work for the admissions office. And I again thought about the long-term thing, like what is going to impact me later on in my life? I'm not going to be a 40-year-old cross-country runner. Like that's just not going to happen. And so it was interesting because you have this group of friends in one aspect, and then you have this group of friends in another. And it was difficult for sure. And there's a lot of emotions, at that point in your life when you're trying to kind of figure everything out and what do I want to do? And so I think that there was definitely a lot of that, especially kind of with those two, not polar opposite, but almost polar opposite types of things that I was involved in.
Yeah, cross country is also really taxing. I mean, it's like really hard.
Especially in college. We did, we competed a lot, and there were some weeks when you were expected to run, 70, 80 miles a week just in training. And that's a lot on your body. So managing that with school, friendships, all of the above can be a lot, but it doesn't kill you, makes you stronger, I guess.
Yeah.
So
What is
yeah.
training like for 70, 80 mile peak week?
I mean, if you're running 7 days a week, that's like 10, 12 miles a day.
Yep. So on certain days we would have practice twice a day, and certain days it would only be once. And then, if we didn't have a competition on Saturdays, we would often do what they call the long runs, which would be anywhere between like 10 to 15 miles on those days. And then you would have practice every morning at 6 a.m. sharp. And it was definitely a lot, but I think I really enjoyed the whole team aspect of cross country. A lot of people think of running as an individual sport, but I think sports can translate so much into your life, into team building, because it really isn't an individual sport. It's the way that it works is there's every competition, they have the top 7 runners compete, right? And then they're only scoring the top 5. So you really need to give it your all during every race to be able to place, because every time counts in those top 5 of your team. And then you're ranked against the top 5 of every other team competing. And so how your individual performance goes impacts you, not only you, but your team and how your team places. And so it's individual, but also very much teamwork at the same time, and working together and encouraging each other and really motivating each other.
After graduating, you worked at KPMG.
I did. I really followed in my parents' footsteps. I looked at, some of the other larger accounting firms, but ultimately I did like the culture best at KPMG. I still think KPMG is a phenomenal company. My cousin's gone on to work there. My cousin's wife's gone on to work there. My other cousin has gone on to work there. So
Did you intern?
clearly it runs
Did
in
you
the family.
intern at KPMG during college?
I did. I interned in the Los Angeles office. And so that's where I started out my career. And I was on the audit side. And one thing that I learned very quickly is when you're an auditor, you learn how to scan documents and read things and analyze things almost instantly, which I feel like kind of gives you a heads up or a leg up when you're looking at any type of document or statement or financial, which I definitely found super helpful. But the intern experience was great. I'm still, friends with a lot of people that I worked with at that office there. And actually, it's kind of weird. Our CEO, Wade Madden at Olympus, he worked for KPMG as well. And our CFO, Nahal, he worked at KPMG as well. We didn't know this until we were all working at Olympus together, but we all have some type of root in accounting. So
I bring that up because I actually worked at PwC.
okay, yes,
Yeah.
I remember us talking about that. How cool.
So I interned at PwC for a couple summers in college and kind of just like rolled with a full-time job.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I guess I'm curious, like, how do you think ChatGPT and all that stuff is going to change the audit world? Because you said a lot of it is like looking, analyzing documents, processing. I feel like that's like ChatGPT.
Man, that is a great question. And I think it's going to transform it immensely and take out a lot of the mundane, like busy work that maybe a lot of the lower level staff are responsible for doing. I know that when I was there, we were starting to outsource a lot of that to, other countries and things like that. But I think that AI is really the next step there for automating a lot of those processes. And to be honest, that's one of the reasons that I actually left KPMG is because I started to see that a lot of those things were going to be automated. And I really wanted something that would challenge me and grow my career. And I don't know what the future of that holds. I still don't. I think there's a lot to be said. But
that was going to be my next question is how does one find themselves transitioning from like KPMG to a property management company?
Yeah, it's a weird transition. I'd never heard of property management before. I did not even know multifamily was an industry. When you were at PwC, did you know that multifamily was an industry?
No. I mean, I've done a number of these podcasts and I think nobody I've talked to was like, I'm going to be in multifamily. You just kind of like fall into it somehow.
Right. I genuinely had no clue that it was an industry in and of its own. I mean, obviously I'd heard of real estate industry and blah, 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 blah. But so after my husband and I got married, we were, living in Southern California and we decided to move out to Texas. And my father-in-law invests in a couple of multifamily properties. And so my husband's goal was to kind of learn the industry and to go into the industry. And at the time, I had transferred to the KPMG Dallas office and I was working on a client at the time that unfortunately had some issues and gotten kicked off of the stock exchange and was having major problems. And I was like, I love to work. I'm a bit of a workaholic, but the 80 to 90 hour weeks were really starting to wear on me. And I didn't love not being able to interact with people as much as I had hoped on the auditing side. Again, I love numbers, very numbers focused, but I needed a little bit more than just sitting behind a computer all day, every day, doing the same exact thing. And so in 2017, my husband was like, well, if our goal someday, which it is to invest in multifamily real estate, I think we should both learn it from the ground up. And I was like, that's a really interesting idea. So at the time I was like, okay, I'm just going to learn it from the ground up. I'm going to go see if I can get a job as a leasing consultant. And I'm going to give myself 1 year to either move up in multifamily or I'm going to come back to KPMG. So I left on great terms. And I was like, okay, I can always come back if this doesn't work out. So I took a massive pay cut. I was like, I'm gonna do this for my own mental sanity. And I think that's where it comes back to what we were talking about earlier. Like you do have to know your boundaries and your limits. And I found Olympus, and from there, within a few months, I had the opportunity to have like a dual role as a leasing consultant and marketing ambassador. I had never even thought about marketing as something that I was interested in or a career choice. And then within 9 months, I was in the marketing side full time. And then the rest is history. And, we've had a lot of growth and change over time. But I was like, if September comes around again and nothing has changed, I don't want to be stagnant. And so I set that goal for myself, and I was able to accomplish it.
So you just fell into like you didn't choose marketing. You chose leasing, but you didn't know it would lead you into becoming
I
like
had no clue on the marketing side. I originally thought, I would really like to do assistant work for a little bit, manager work, and then potentially even go into property accounting, or something on the corporate side in that aspect, asset management, something like that. Marketing never even crossed my brain because I was one of those typical people that thought of marketing as graphic design or all creative. And I had zero clue that it's actually a very analytical and ROI driven field.
And what I find very interesting about your career path right now is, like you said, it's very rare for somebody to stay at a company like as long as you have been at Olympus, right?
Yeah.
It's been what, 7 years, 7.5 years?
7.5 years. Yeah.
So my brother works at a startup, and he's coming on five-ish years, which I thought was long.
Yeah.
People love to jump around these days.
They do. Yeah.
Why have you decided to like stay at Olympus for that long?
Olympus is a really unique company in a lot of ways. When I started in 2017, so Olympus was founded in 1992, so we're about 32 years old. In 2017, I think we had around 40-ish properties, less than 15,000 units. And we now have over 34,000 units and are valued at over $8 billion. The growth has been insane, and it's a huge testament to the leadership of the company and the way that we've strategically invested in deals and partnered with a lot of our different partners on the investment side as well. And so I've never, ever felt stagnant in my career at Olympus. I've always felt like I'm learning, growing, and there's something for me to do. And the job is not yet done. And I still feel that way to this day. I feel beyond blessed that they have given me the opportunities to grow a team, to lead a team, build a team, and to really almost come up with different strategies and put us in the place that we are from a marketing perspective, and get my hands into so many different aspects of that. I mean, we're a young company. Like a lot of our leadership is young, and we all really want to be innovative. And how can we do that? So we're all constantly challenging each other. And a lot of the programs that I have the opportunity to run and that my team and I do are not what you would consider marketing programs. Like maybe something on the ancillary revenue driving side, or maybe something on the HR, like employee engagement, health and wellness side. Like we wear so many different hats that I think make us very well faceted and are constantly challenging us and giving us new ways to grow.
So you, the CEO right now is like, you said pretty young too. Isn't he like 30 something?
Gosh, I don't know if I'm allowed to say his age.
Fairly young,
age on here,
which is pretty impressive
yeah.
given how big the company is.
Yeah.
What does why do you think Olympus has been able to? There's many companies that try to grow fast, right? Why do you think Olympus has grown the way it has? Like, what are the cultural values, and like what makes it different?
So we do have 5 specific values: customer-centered, trust, family, teamwork, and fun, which I think all play a huge role in all of the people that work at Olympus People say it's the best company that they've ever worked for. I think it's a phenomenal place to work. We fly in people every year for a holiday party. This year it's in Vegas. It's actually this week.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, everyone's going to Vegas. We took everyone for our 30th anniversary on a cruise, a 5-day cruise. I think it was 5 days, and we went to the Caribbean area. And that was every single person in the company and a plus one. Doesn't matter if you're a groundskeeper or if you are the CEO, you got to go and you got to bring a plus one
How many
on
people
a
were
cruise.
on that cruise?
I believe we had close to 700 total. But yeah, it's we definitely believe in hard work, but we also believe in rewarding our people with a lot of fun. And I think that speaks volumes to kind of the culture and environment. But on the growth side, in terms of acquisitions and continuing to grow the company, we have a very strategic investment method and have really leaned in on the idea of fixed rate debt rather than variable rate debt, which I think it's almost market condition proof, right? You don't have to worry about that huge variable when the market conditions are not as good. And that's been tremendously impacted our growth over the past several years on the acquisition side.
So you guys don't purchase anything that's a variable?
We definitely steer away from it.
Okay.
Hmm.
Okay. That's was probably a very good decision, like
Hmm.
in the early, 5, 6 years ago,
Uh,
when things kind of flip flopped. Okay.
and also, I mean, we have an entire acquisitions team that very strategically underwrites like hundreds upon hundreds of deals to figure out which ones are going to be the best for us. And then it also, again, comes down to those relationships that you make. Because if somebody that you have a good relationship with is selling their property, they're going to reach out to somebody that they know, right? As the first opportunity.
So does that applies? So like if you are super well networked in, you have a massive advantage to getting like first sight on deals and
Absolutely.
got it. And the
Absolutely.
founders and the CEO, they've been in the industry for a while. And
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Do you ever think about going to a different, like staying within Olympus, trying to be active in different parts of the business, like maybe on the acquisition side?
So one thing that I'm very grateful for is I kind of already have the opportunity to do that at Olympus. Yes, my role is technically VP of marketing, right? But over the years, like I've gotten to oversee a technology working group where we look at and demo different technologies in every aspect, whether it's operational, on the acquisition side, construction side, all of that. I've gotten to look at, all of the financials. And that's something that I think our leadership team does really well is being transparent and open, like, here's why we're looking at these deals. Here is what properties asset management has identified as properties of focus. And no, it's not specifically because they're not getting enough traffic. It's because we have, debt expiring on this date for this property. We have an investor that really wants to see a heavier cash on cash return at this property and really being transparent into all of those functions. So I don't feel like I've been pigeonholed just into marketing at Olympus, which I think is really unique because a lot of times things are so siloed. But we've really wanted to collaborate across departments, whether it's our training department, or our culture and development department, our HR department. We all work very hands on together to make Olympus the best that it can be.
Have you had any mentors in the industry?
So I don't know if I've had anyone specifically that I would call a mentor, but Alexis Merle, who was my previous boss at Olympus, she was the one who really believed in me and brought me into the marketing department, even though my background didn't really seem to align with marketing, right? And I feel like I can always, ask her for advice and ask her questions that she will be very insightful on. She's a wealth of knowledge. She's been absolutely tremendous. And then, kind of outside of the industry, I do lean on both of my parents a lot just for their advice when it comes to career things. So.
Do you lean on one parent for different things?
You know, that's a really good question. I've actually never thought about that. I don't know. I think probably subconsciously, but not that I can think
Not
of
that
off the top of my head. So,
I want to ask about. I think it's just super fun to talk about, but like what on-site stories do you have that
oh
you've
gosh.
seen or been a part of? Anything? I've heard things like people getting married, like murder, crazy stuff. Have you seen anything that's worth noting?
We did find a wedding in the clubhouse on the cameras the next day. One time that was interesting. So the whole married thing, yes, somebody got married in our clubhouse. That was
Like a
very
full-on wedding,
yeah
or just
yeah. That's, they didn't tell us that they were going to be having this wedding. They just had the wedding. I mean, the stories, multifamily is not a boring industry. The stories are endless. We had not at the property that I worked at, but we had a property that somebody drove through the leasing office, his massive truck. Yep, completely through the leasing office. It was at night, so luckily no one was injured.
he lived at the building or just some random person?
I can't recall if it was
Yeah.
I believe it was a resident. Yes, and drunk driver drove straight through, caused hundreds of thousands of dollars of damage. So that was a unique one. But I mean, the stories are
Does the person
quite
is the
endless.
person liable or
I don't recall how
yeah,
all of that ended up
yeah,
working out. I mean, obviously, I'm sure some type of insurance played a role in some way,
yeah.
shape, or form. But
Wow.
yeah, yeah. I mean, we had a high rise that just seemed to have one problem after another. And there was a time in the summer when basically all of the air conditioning went out. We had to put people up in hotels for 2 weeks. Like it's pretty crazy the things that you see in multifamily for sure.
When you think about you started as a leasing consultant and now you're a VP of marketing, which means that you started as kind of like an individual contributor and now you manage people. What have you learned about management and leadership?
That is a great question. I think people management is one of the hardest but most rewarding parts about what I get to do now. And it's been a learning curve for sure. So I am by no means perfect. And it's, taken me a long ways to get to where I am in terms of being able to lead a team. But something that that Alexis actually told me is she's like, I want you to be my boss someday, or I want to equip you to be my boss someday with the tools and things that you need. And so I've always had that mentality with my team. And I want them to learn everything. Even if it might be drinking from a fire hose, or even if it might be hard, or even if it means hopping on calls that they have no clue what's being talked about or going on, the more you can absorb and learn and take in as somebody that might not be in a leadership role yet, the more you're going to be equipped to be a leader. And I would love for every single one of my team members to be my boss someday. And I think that each of them definitely have the capability to do that. And it's all about, why would you be afraid that somebody you're going to train too well and they're going to take your job? That is a horrible mentality to go through. And unfortunately, in this industry, I do see it a lot. I do see people be very protective of their roles, or I'm not going to share this information with so and so that reports to me because I don't want to give them too much power. But you're really doing yourself a disservice if you do that, because you want to be equipping and training the people under you to be able to take responsibilities off your plate and to be able to grow their own careers. And I think that they will value and respect you for it.
I think it's also a good forcing function for you to then you have to also grow, right? Like if they're going
Mhm.
to take your job, that's a good thing because then you should go up
Exactly.
and you should continue to rise through the ranks.
Don't look at it as taking away your job, but giving you just an opportunity for even more growth for
Exactly.
sure.
Mark Zuckerberg, founder of Facebook, used this hiring principle, which is if the roles were reversed, would I work for this person? So when he was hiring people, he would look at the candidate that he wanted to hire and imagine if the roles were reversed, would he be happy being reporting to this person? And I think it's a really important framing of even setting the bar for hiring and like how you want to place, but not only like when you're hiring, but also like when you're working with them, like imagining the other way around.
Absolutely. Have you ever heard of the predictive index?
I haven't, no.
So it's something that every single person that applies for a job at Olympus has to take as part of the application process. But it's one of those not personality, but yes, personality and kind of how you function in the workplace tests. And there, I think there's like 16 different types of people. So it's similar to like a Myers Briggs or to an Enneagram or something like that, but it's specifically designed for the workplace. And it's been really instrumental in kind of learning how people function and collaborate together and how everybody brings different strengths to the table. And so each person, you're identified as one of these 16 different types. And there's anything from a promoter to a maverick to a guardian to an operator. And all of them fall kind of on different scales when it comes to this chart. So I would definitely encourage you to check it out if you haven't. It's super insightful and it's really helped me with team management.
So I've done the Myers-Briggs and the Enneagram.
Okay.
I've not heard of the predictive. What are you on the predictive index?
So my title, I guess, would be a promoter, which means that I am thorough, I'm organized, but I also enjoy thoughtful delegation and encouragement of team members. So
Do you have candidates do that test before hiring?
do. It's actually part of the application process at Olympus. Every single person has to take it.
And then you hire based on like strengths and compatibility and all
I
that.
mean, that's just one of the factors that a manager can use when hiring someone. And it actually helps with, you come up with different interview questions that might align with that person better to get to know them better. It has all of these super helpful tools from not only a hiring perspective, but then also like a team management perspective once you've hired that person.
What have been your like toughest, if anything, that you can recall, like leadership moments, I guess, like where you were put in a difficult position?
Yeah. Again, it's never a cakewalk, right? And sometimes you never expect the things that might fall on your plate because you're a leader, whether it's helping someone go through a personal crisis that they're going through and they're leaning on you. And I'm by no means trained in counseling or psychology or any of that. And figuring out kind of how you can cope with that, or maybe two team members that don't see eye to eye on something and being able to have sometimes those difficult conversations, that's been a really tough challenge for me. The more you do it, obviously, the easier it gets. But I think that's something that it's always never going to be. There's a script for what you have to do, and so you have to rely on your intuition. You have to rely on your research, and then also like your resources and talking to people that you can trust and rely on to see like how should I be going about this situation, because you're dealing with people's lives, right? And but I think it can also be 10 times more rewarding at the same time than it can be difficult.
You're data driven because you love numbers and all of that. How much do you use intuition to make decisions
Oh, that is a good
versus
question.
data?
I would say I probably lean a little bit more on the data side, but it does not go to say I don't use any intuition at all. I mean, when you have that gut feeling, you have that gut feeling, right? And usually that gut feeling can kind of trigger if something's wrong, and then I go down the data research wormhole. But if there is a mistake, I tend to find it. So that's at least what I like to say. I don't know. What about you? Do you think
Yeah.
you're like 60-40, 50-50?
I think it's changed a lot over time. I think intuition and like the more self-belief I have, the more intuition I use. The
Yeah.
less self-belief I have, the more data I use. And over time, as I've started trusting myself more, I've also leaned on intuition because I think the thing is, especially when you're running like a company or starting something new, if you use data, it usually means that what you're going to do has like been done. Like you're looking at historic like trends and then you're doing that, which is good.
Mhm.
But
when you use intuition because there's not data that supports something, usually you can unlock things that completely change the business. For example, like I didn't look at data for this podcast and was like, oh, there's all this like data that like you should do a podcast on personal stories and all this stuff.
Yeah.
It was more my intuition of like, what do I enjoy doing? What do I
Right.
think I'm good at? And what do I think this will resonate with this industry? And it was one of those intuition bets, right? And I think so far it's like really resonating. So I think similarly, as I've progressed, um, I want to trust my own intuition more because usually that it will force you to like make decisions that can completely change the business.
I absolutely love that. I'm going to take that as an action item
Yeah.
from this because you're right. I think I do lean on intuition a lot more than I think I do, but now I want to think about that more consciously.
Yeah. And I think like the other thing is like, especially I didn't even know like early in my career, I didn't really know I had heard of the word intuition, but when you don't have belief in yourself, like it's hard to trust your intuition because you're like the safer thing to do is to just look at the data because if you look at the data, then you can point to something
Mhm.
that like supports the decision. It's like, oh, did this because like what, it was obvious everybody did this.
Yeah.
But if everybody's doing it or there's data to support it or whatever, like how are you going to do something new? Like Steve Jobs didn't look at the data and was like, somebody wants an iPhone. It was more like, what is the intuition that
Right.
he is using based on his ability to like build something new. That's why sometimes even Steve Jobs like talks about how looking when you're building a product, you work with customers, right? You get feedback and you learn and all that stuff. He actually didn't take a lot of feedback from customers
Yeah.
because like sometimes customers don't know what they want,
Right.
right? Like they didn't know they wanted an iPhone and like they wanted this like no keyboard and all of this stuff. Like he just thought about his intuition. He trusted himself and obviously he has great intuition. And he took this bet that completely transformed the entire industry. So I think similarly, like
Right.
you asked that question, like whether it's 60-40, 70-30, I would say it started off as like 90-10 and
Wow.
like 90-10, 90 being data, 10% intuition.
Yeah.
I think now I'm leaning towards like 70% intuition, 30% data.
That's
So,
huge. That's a great mentality shift. And I think we did something similar at Olympus a while back. So my team and I get to oversee a campaign that we call Olympus Empowers, which is all about empowering every single Olympus employee to be the best version of themselves. It's like a health and wellness campaign. So we do different challenges throughout the year, whether it's, a weight goal challenge or a hydration challenge or offering meditation sessions or things like that. And we came up with the idea a couple of years back to do a step challenge and to pair people across the country from each other. So you might, anybody can sign up for it. You could be a groundskeeper at Olympus Corsair in San Diego, and then you could be the business manager at Alea Apartments in Savannah, Georgia. And you're going to be on a team of 5 people and you're stepping together towards a common goal. And that we didn't have any research on if this would take off or not. This year, we're in the middle of it right now because we're stepping into the holidays to, walk off all the turkey, I guess. But it is our most participated challenge that we've seen ever. And we have about 200 people doing it this year. And it's so cool to see people come together and encourage each other from across the country and really just like invest in each other as fellow Olympus team members that they've never met. And just something that we thought, in our gut, that would be a really neat idea to do.
I
So,
really like that. That's awesome. Is there is it only two people pair or is there like a leaderboard for everybody?
so they're teams of 5.
Oh, teams of 5. Okay.
And so I think we have, what is 5?
40?
Yeah, we have about 40 teams that are competing, and it's about a 3-week challenge. And so it's, every week we'll check in and we'll show the rankings of, you come up with a team name, and a fun team name, and like this team is in first place. This team has, 700,000 steps, and it's in this place. So, and then it's really fun. And then the winners obviously get like a prize right before Christmas that they can use for some extra Christmas shopping.
What are you guys using to like? What app is this, or how are you like?
So, if you have an app that you would recommend to track this, we would love it. It is more based on the honor system. So, like whatever tool you use to track your steps, then you input them at the end of each day into like our SharePoint system.
Okay.
So-
When I was working at PwC, we did something. I can't remember the tool. I think it was one of Richard Branson. Like it was a Virgin group tool, some app or
Virgin
whatever.
Pulse.
It was Virgin Pulse. I think that's what we were using. Yeah.
Yeah, we actually used them for 1 year when we tried this, and had a couple of hiccups, but that might have been user error.
Okay. Yeah. And I remember doing the step count thing. And I'm just so competitive that like it became like kind of a problem. I was like walking for like multiple hours because I was like, I need to win.
Yeah.
But it is a really fun team bonding thing. I think we should try to. That's interesting. I kind of want to explore that.
I could see that as like a multifamily type of like thing that
Are we
people
like coming
could
up with an
sign.
idea? What if we like do it for the whole industry?
I mean, I would be down. That sounds really cool.
Maybe we should explore that.
Or maybe even, during a conference, like who can get the most steps or something.
That's a really interesting idea. Wow.
Stay active
Stay
amongst
active.
all the eating and drinking that you're doing.
I love that. That's
Yeah.
cool. That's a really neat idea and a neat bonding kind of exercise for your team.
Yeah, but again, it goes all back to the intuition. Like I didn't do any research on that.
See, that's what I'm
so-
saying. It's like, because I mean, when you do research on data, it just means that other people have done it or there's some evidence that supports it. So
Right.
if there's some evidence that supports it and you do it, why is it going to be that new for somebody? Or why is it going to stand out? Or why is it going to be different?
Yeah.
So really cool.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Question on like the industry as a whole. You obviously are involved with AI. You've used AI. Where do you think the industry is like? Where do you think AI can be useful that is not being used today for multifamily?
It's a really, really interesting question. And I think there's definitely so many use cases for AI that we're probably not taking advantage of yet. But my biggest thing is I think we need to train people on how to use AI most effectively before we like jump into it further as an industry because a lot of people if they don't know how to use AI effectively then they just think of it as more of like a pain or like a something that's taking away from their job or they don't look at it with the right mentality or don't harness it correctly. So that's like one thing that I would love to figure out how we can deal with better, like offer AI trainings because I mean, AI is so helpful. I use AI all the time. I absolutely love it.
I don't use Google anymore. I just use like ChatGPT.
But-
rarely use Google.
But I've had to kind of train myself on how to prompt the AI or how to best use the AI to get it to do what I need it to do. One idea that I had was, I don't know about you, but I get like a bajillion emails, a bajillion. And sometimes things can get lost in the weeds. And I would love for some type of like AI summary tool of like the most important things that, come to you throughout the day or like a summary bullet points from certain, people that you're working with that are going to be most important or action items or something like that, which I'm sure something out there exists for it, but I haven't heard of anything yet.
I use this tool called Superhuman.
Ooh,
It's like an email client, like email tool alternative to Gmail, and it's like it's a tech company, and
okay.
it doesn't have like at least I haven't explored the like AI categorization and all of that, but it's definitely like much cleaner and faster than Gmail. So
Yeah.
something you can explore.
Superhuman. I
Yeah,
like it.
superhuman.
I like it. That's awesome.
So what about within multifamily? Like, do you think there are opportunities on the corporate side of things, like even on site? Like, where do you think AI is like where do the efficiencies lie? Because everybody's focused, as we are on leasing and operations and all that. Do you see any other opportunities?
I do. And weirdly enough, I actually think on kind of like the accounting and billing side. I don't know about other people out there, but that's something that it's still such a manual process, whether it's the invoicing process from the vendor, making sure they get paid on time, cutting checks, accounting for things properly, coding things properly on financials, especially if you have lots of different investors and maybe different charts of accounts and things like that. There's so much complication. And right now, at least for us, we're not really automating any of that. And I think it could definitely be streamlined.
Sarah, I think that's a good place to end.
Okay.
Thank you so much for being on the show. It's really cool to do this because we meet at conferences. I meet so many people at events, but you don't actually get the chance to like sit down and hear from them.
No.
You're not, if you're at a conference, you're either at the bar, or you're at the booth, or at the event where there's a lot of noise. You're not sitting down one on one, actually learning about them. So
Yeah.
I'm really grateful to be able to do that with you, and I'm excited to have this episode released and for you to continue to be a listener.
Well, I'm grateful for the opportunity. It goes along with my philosophy of work hard, play harder, and network hardest. I think networking is the most critical thing that you can do. And I would love to reverse podcast you sometime because I'd love to hear more details about your story too. So
Yeah, of
it's
course.
been such a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. And where can people find you?
LinkedIn. Sarah Gencarella. Not the easiest last name to spell, but Jen as in generous, car as in what you drive, and Ella as in Cinderella.
I like that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Sarah.
All right. Thanks, Shiv.